a question via the chat. It says, what is the guideline for mastery criteria for an early learner for making spontaneous Mands? How many spontaneous Mands should a learner make every hour? Also, what would be counted as a prompted Mand, and does it include when the item is visible to the learner?
It's a good question.
Can we say that depends?
It's always.
It always depends. I would say in terms of mastery criteria, it depends. But usually, you know, if you're just doing Mand training, like if you're really just trying to set up a ton of Mands, I would say that mastery criteria would be like 60 Mands an hour is what the research says. But if you're doing programming and you're doing Mand training just, you know, for 5 minutes within that hour, or if you're doing it kind of interspersed, our data seem to be a lot lower. So, you know, once my instructors are doing programming and they're doing some of the table, they're doing natural environment stuff and only setting up Mands, you know, every little bit because they're also doing other things. Our manding is usually around 20 to 30 an hour. So like I said, it just depends on what your expectations are, etc.
What I sometimes do for manding is like a changing criterion design. So you can kind of see where they at. Like where are they starting from, what's their baseline, and then see if they can just keep increasing. And then at the point where like they can't increase anymore, then like you might, you know, look at changing or mastering it or updating it.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. I've done some of that as well. The other thing would be what I was going to say is just, it really depends on kind of what manding you're asking for. I've seen Mands that are like 100 and some odd an hour, and you're like, okay, well, there's only 60 minutes in an hour. So that means, you know, they're manding like 3 times a minute, which is awesome. But then you sit and you watch sessions and, you know, what the therapist is saying, you know, like holding up phone, and the therapist is saying, I want phone, you know, prompting, I want phone. And then the kiddo becomes a broken record, and the Mand is, I want phone, take it away. I want phone, I want phone, I want phone, I want phone. I would argue that that's not really great Mand training, because they've learned one Mand and that's it. Sure, they're asking for it, but it could just be a rote response. That you really want to vary that up. And, you know, what I typically say is change it. So you can't count it as a separate Mand unless you've come up with a separate way of asking. So maybe I want phone, turn it on, give it to me, thanks. Or I want phone, turn it on. And then, you know, okay, time's up, 1 more minute. Take away the phone. I want phone. They can ask for I want phone again because they've had other Mands in between. But yeah, it also depends on the skill of the therapist, right? So, you know, how many spontaneous Mands should a learner make every hour really depends on how many Mand opportunities your therapists are setting up. Any other comments on that, Shira?
No, I agree with that.
What do you count as a prompted Mand?
So I think I would start by counting it as, like, if the goal is for them to request items in view, then it would be prompted if they just needed any other support, and unprompted if it was in view, that would still be counted as unprompted. And then maybe the next step, once they've mastered it in view, would be out of view. But I would kind of break it down to be like in view, prompted, unprompted, out of view, prompted, and unprompted, because it is important for them to be able to see it. Like, I think the BCBA breaks it down that way, or the ABLES, as in request items in view and then out of view. And it also depends on the age. So like, you know, a 2 or 3 year old would be a lot harder for them to ask for items out of view. But if you're talking about an older student, then it would be a lot easier. And then does it count if it's a text cue? Is that counted as in view if there's a picture prompt? So there are ways to break it down where it's just a little bit clearer depending on what the learner is capable of. And then like making the prompts, like breaking down the prompts so that they're doable and successful, and then fading those prompts. So if it is in view prompted, then you could move to a picture prompt, and then you can move to nothing in view.
Awesome. Yeah. So just defining that, and then you can, when you really define what the Mand criteria is, then you can really see whether it's prompted or unprompted, and you can base your decision on what you've defined.
And I think what gets confusing about the prompted versus unprompted is when you're talking about that SD of what do you want? Because that would be, I mean, we've talked about how that's not really something we recommend, because it's teaching a child to wait to be asked, what do you want? And then that's not, like, that in itself is really a prompt, but it's not a great prompt, because verbal prompts are never the best prompts. So that what do you want, like if we're just getting rid of that totally, the item itself would be the prompt. But if they're able to request with the item in view and nothing else, then I would call that spontaneous. And if you're holding up the item and having to say like water or like "wuh" or something, then that would be a prompt. So anything like, you know, above and beyond the item, without the "what do you want," I would call that prompted.
Yeah, for sure.